dive. This is where we take your source material, the articles, notes, whatever you send us, and really try to zero in on the most valuable insights.
Get right to the heart of it.
Exactly. So today we're looking at an excerpt you shared. It's from a podcast, actually, aimed at learning English.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is it takes this big turn into a much broader idea, the power of positive thinking.
Yeah, it's quite a pivot, isn't it? From language specifics to, mindset.
It really is. So our mission here, this deep dive, is to unpack what this specific source is saying about how our thinking, this positive thinking idea, might, fundamentally change how we learn. Not just English, but anything.
And maybe even how we approach life generally, the source seems to suggest.
Right. So get ready. We're going to explore how, at least according to this material, shifting your thoughts could be maybe a surprising shortcut.
Or at least a powerful tool for tackling learning, handling challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where does the source start us off? Well, it kicks right off with the core idea, this belief in positive thinking.
Right. The premise being, if you think good thoughts, consciously choose them.
Then you don't just feel a bit better emotionally, you actually feel, stronger. And crucially for learners, you learn better.
And it's not just a fuzzy feeling, is it? The source suggests it's more functional than that.
Exactly. It implies these positive thoughts make the actual process of learning easier. Like, they help your brain work more effectively.
They had that specific example, didn't they, in the conversation bit?
Yeah, instead of that voice saying, oh, this is too hard.
Which we all hear sometimes.
We do. They suggest saying, I can do this. And that simple switch, they argue, makes a real difference in how your brain handles the task.
So it's about that internal dialogue, the self-talk.
Mm-hmm. They're drawing a direct line, it seems, between what you say to yourself and how well your sort of cognitive gears turn, especially when things get tough.
Okay, that sounds promising. Thinking positively helps you learn. But learning isn't always smooth sailing. What about setbacks?
Right. We all hit bumps.
Does the source address that inevitable question? Okay, but what if I fail?
It does. And it offers a pretty interesting perspective on failure itself.
Which is?
That failure isn't bad. It's not the end. The source explicitly calls it just the step to success.
Just a step. That's quite a reframe, isn't it?
It is. So according to this view, people with a positive mindset don't see mistakes as final judgments.
They see them as
lesson. That's the word they use. Valuable feedback, essentially.
Okay, so you see it as a lesson. What then?
Well, the key action, as the source puts it, is what follows. They don't just sit there, they try again.
Wow.
And critically, they improve. The mistake becomes fuel for getting better. It turns it into an opportunity, really.
Okay, that makes sense. Shifting from failure is final to failure is feedback for the next attempt.
Yeah.
But how? If this positive view doesn't come naturally, how do you actually start thinking like that?
Good question. And the source moves right into that, into the practical stuff, the how-to.
Great. What does it suggest?
It starts with something surprisingly physical, simple. Smile more.
Smile more. Okay. Easy enough to try, I guess.
Yeah, just a starting point. Then it gets more internal. It says you need to actively replace negative thoughts with positive ones.
Actively replace them. So it's a conscious effort, like catching the negative thought and swapping it out.
Precisely. A deliberate substitution. And they even give examples of what to swap in.
Oh, like what?
Things like telling yourself, I will try my best every day, or maybe I'm improving every day. Specific positive affirmations.
So having those positive phrases ready to go when the negative ones pop up.
Exactly. It's about, as the source says, saying good things to yourself. And also, importantly, being kind to yourself in the process.
Building that internal support.
Yes. And it wraps up this how-to part by suggesting you just focus on taking one small step forward each day. Makes it feel manageable, not this huge, overwhelming task.
One small step. Okay. So let's say someone follows this advice. They smile, they replace the thoughts, use the phrases, take small steps. What's the payoff, according to the source? What's the bigger impact?
Well, the source claims the effects kind of ripple outwards. It's not just one thing.
Like what?
On a personal level, it says you start feeling better, more confident. Makes sense.
Sure.
You also become more open to learning, less defensive maybe, and you don't give up easily when you hit those inevitable rough patches.
Okay, so resilience, confidence. What else?
They even mention a sort of physiological effect that your brain stays calm.
A calm brain. And that helps how?
Well, they link that calmness directly to better cognitive function. You end up remembering more, speaking more clearly, and ultimately learning faster.
Wow, okay, so feeling better, trying harder, and your brain actually working better.
Yeah, and they even tie it to potential real-world results, like the example conversation mentioning improved grades. It all adds up, they suggest, to feeling more hopeful overall.
It's quite a picture they paint. This internal shift, changing your mood, your effort, your actual learning ability.
And they're careful to say, this isn't presented as magic,
Right.
but as a real change in how your mind works, based on these conscious choices and action.
But connects all these different outcomes.
Yeah.
Feelings, persistence, brain function, even grades, back to that starting point.
Yeah,
Choosing your thoughts.
exactly. That seems to be the core argument presented in this material.
Now, just quickly for anyone listening who might have used this source in its original context for English learning.
Yes. The source did also include definitions for some key vocabulary.
Right, just to make sure everyone was on the same page.
Yeah, clarifying words like thoughts, replace, grades, and that big one, mindset, which kind of ties it all together.
Helps connect the dots back to the language learning angle.
Okay.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. Whatever you're working on right now.
Could be anything. A new skill, a project, study.
Right. This deep dive into the source suggests that these principles, the power of your thoughts, reframing mistakes as lessons, not failures.
And that idea of just taking consistent, small steps forward.
These are presented as kind of universal tools. Tools you can use no matter what you're learning or trying to achieve.
Tools that, according to this source at least, could be really key for getting through the hard parts, staying motivated and, reaching your goals.
So exploring this source material on positive thinking really suggests that maybe just changing what you tell yourself inside your head
And changing how you look at setbacks.
could actually unlock a lot more potential than you might think in learning and, well, maybe in other areas too.
It definitely leaves you thinking, though. If our thoughts, according to this source, have such a tangible impact, such power over how we learn and perform, well, what does that say about the effort involved?
The effort.
Yeah, the effort needed to consistently choose those positive thoughts, especially when things are genuinely tough, when you're frustrated or you feel like you really have failed this time. Choosing positivity then, that takes real conscious work, doesn't it?
That's a really interesting point to consider. How much power does it take to wield the power of positive thinking when things feel overwhelmingly negative? Something to definitely mull over as you continue on your own learning path.